All right, everyone, let's go ahead and settle in here today. Just wanted to introduce myself real quickly. I'm Cody. I am a technical account manager here at Synology, and I'll be your guide on this webinar and for a few more to come as well. So today we're going to be discussing a topic that is kind of a really good tool for everyone who is kind of working in the SMB space. Synology Directory Server is going to be a great portion of the Swiss Army knife that is Synology NAS devices. So what you're going to be able to do in a lot of cases is replace domain controller costs in more of a traditional setup by using this Synology Directory Server deployment. So we're going to go through standing up a domain and go through also setting up roaming profiles as well as deploying group policy objects using RSAT as well with the Synology Directory Server. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start the share and go on with this educational moment. All right. So as mentioned, we're going to be going through Synology Directory Server in this presentation. Just a quick agenda today to go over things that are on the docket. We're going to first take a look at the setup of the Synology Directory Server and also take a look at some of the features as well associated with it, what you can do to manage the environment, and also we're going to take a look at different use cases in utilizing Synology as something you can join to a pre-existing domain or use it as a standalone domain controller or utilize it in more of like an office in a box scenario as kind of a hardware as a service model as well. So we're going to first touch base on the initial setup of the Synology Directory Server. This is honestly a quick and easy domain stand-up, probably the quickest I've ever done, honestly. And it's really just a few buttons to get the domain stood up, and there's not too much additional tweaking that you have to do to make sure that is a solid solution all around. So in this portion of the webinar for setup, we're going to go over some prerequisites that you will need to focus on prior to standing up the domain. Pretty simple stuff. It's pretty much best practices that align with how you would stand up a general Windows domain as well. We're also going to talk about the setup on the server side and as well as the client side, actually join a computer to the domain and show you what that looks like. In terms of the prerequisites, just like with a normal domain controller, you're going to want to set up a local static IP for that controller, and in this case, for your Synology NAS. As you can imagine, and as you probably know, you actually point your clients to the NAS's IP or your domain controller's IP to hit that address. And if that address is changing or shifting, then you won't be able to authenticate correctly against that domain, and it's just not going to go well. And another thing you want to focus on is you want to leave any domain or LDAP environment that the Synology NAS is currently attached to. And that's just because you're creating your own domain in this case. And so you want to leave any of those domains, and you will get a warning from the Synology itself saying, hey, you're joined to Azure or another on-prem kind of environment, and you will want to remove yourself from that before launching your own. As with any other domain controller, you want to use a unique domain on the LAN so that there's no collisions or conflicts with that domain name inside of your network. In terms of setup, you're going to see that Synology Directory Server, hereafter known in this presentation as SDS, is going to be a simple wizard-based stand-up that is very akin to most of our other packages. So it's going to be almost, I believe it's 3 button clicks to actually stand up the domain. And what's great about this is while it's creating the domain, it pre-configures the DNS server, applies your NAS's name as an A record and all that good stuff. And likewise, when you join computers as well, it'll do the same. Just like with any other domain environment, you can add users, groups, and enforce a password policy as well. On the client side, just like any other time you're going to join a domain, you want to point the client DNS to the Synology NAS's address specifically. And with that, whenever you join the domain, it will auto-register an A record for the computer with the computer's name appended with your domain name as well. And something we're going to be touching on today is roaming profiles. This is a great feature I know if people are moving computers from place to place and still need access to their files. This is something that you can definitely set up with the Synology Directory Server. So without further ado, let's go ahead and go into the demo and take a look at standing up a domain and that entire workflow. So here we are, we're in DSM, everybody's favorite operating system. The main thing that we're going to focus on today is Synology Directory Server. It's down here on the left. We've already got it downloaded, but of course, like anything else, if you don't have it downloaded, you're going to want to go into Package Center and grab that and go ahead and install it. You have to scroll down or search for it, and you can scroll past all these other great offerings that Synology can help you with once you have the NAS itself. Go ahead and install that, and you can go into your menu up here and launch Directory Server. But we're going to do it from our icon because we already got it ready. Initial stand up of the domain, it'll tell you like, hey, there isn't one, so let's go ahead and do it for spot.local and add a password for it as well. So what you're going to see here is in a few clicks, we're going to begin to stand up the domain. 1, 2, and it's creating the domain. And in the back end here, it is actually automatically creating the DNS records that you need. And we'll take a look at that in a few moments. So now our domain is actually stood up and available on the network. So what we're going to do next is actually go and create a user. Best practice for pretty much any domain is to create a domain admin user. But as you can see, there's different categories for computers and controllers as well. So if we go to user, we're going to make our domain admin user Cody instead of just using the regular administrator password because you don't usually want to do that. Make sure you do email as well because you can actually recover your password through email notifications as well. And add in a password here. And since I'm an admin, I'm going to go ahead and make it so my password never expires. I'll change it when I need to. So whenever we hit next, it's just a couple more clicks here, and we have to hit just one checkbox to make sure we're a domain admin. It's right down there in the middle. Go ahead, hit the checkbox, hit next, and go ahead and apply. So now it's creating that domain admin user, Cody, and it's going to be ready to go to log in with whenever I go to join the domain to this PC. If we search for my name, you can see it's already there. So it's pretty much ready to go at this point in time. And you could go ahead and join a domain as normal. Let's take a look at the guest profile. By default, it's actually disabled, so you don't have to worry about locking down the guest profile either. So now what we're going to do is go over to DNS server and show you what the records actually look like after it automatically creates those records. So you can see it already has a zone for spot.local. And under resolution, you can also add forwarders and that kind of thing. You also have logs like everything else in DSM. And you can also set up different things like keys as well. Different types of algorithms as well can be associated with that, MD5 or SHA 512. And you can also edit your views too. But really with these different sections, you can see I'm not really changing anything, just showing you where some stuff is. And that's because by default, you don't really have to change anything in these settings or anything like that. Once you set up the domain in that initial wizard, you're pretty much good to go. Not too much tweaking unless you need that for your specific environment. You can switch up your SOA record if you want, but again, it's not really necessary for a simple domain install. You may spend some time editing your resource records, and you can add these for different network devices if you'd like to resolve things by domain name as well. As you can see, it's already created spot.local with my NAS IP address and orangutan.spot.local, which is the NAS's name in this case. You see it pulls that IP and that name directly from the NAS when you create the domain itself. So go ahead and hit finish here. So as you can probably remember, we were already set up our domain user and that kind of thing. So let me just check one thing real here. Okay, so what we're going to do next is actually go into control panel, and we're going to actually change our DNS in our network adapter so that it will point to the Synology NAS, that IP address that was already registered for that spot.local. Go ahead and open your adapter settings. And as you can see, I'm on network 11 right now. So once adapter settings come up, you would right click your adapter, properties. And once this pops up, we're going to head over to IPv4 and set up a manual DNS address. Go ahead and hit this box here, and we're going to type in this same address that is applied to your NAS, and we're going to go ahead and just type that in as the DNS server because you already have that service running on your NAS itself. So when we hit OK here, you're going to be able to now hit the domain as normal. So what you would want to do next is, of course, go into System and join the domain. As you can see, I'm actually already joined to one, but we're going to go ahead and join to that new one we just created, spot.local. Go ahead and delete this one. And as you can see here, it's going to load up an authentication screen. We're going to use that domain admin we just created, that Cody address, spot/Cody, type in my password, and you're going to see, just like with a normal Windows domain join, you're going to actually pretty much immediately be joined to the domain since you pointed the DNS correctly. So whenever you hit OK here, after it fully completes the join, it's actually going to tell you to reboot at this point in time. And so we're going to go ahead and do that here in just a moment. And when we hit OK and close here, that's when it'll prompt you to restart. And we're going to go ahead and do that. So that's pretty much how you stand up a domain and join it to the Synology system. As you can see, it's a pretty quick and smooth process. The domain creation took all of about 3 clicks, and likewise with adding the user as well. And as you can see, there's not much tweaking that you have to do to the system to immediately join to the domain. This next section is actually going to be about the features of Synology Directory Server. It is honestly a fully featured domain controller, and it gives you fully featured domain administration as well because it's compatible with Windows RSAT as well. So you don't have to switch up your normal management workflow, really. You can use the same tools that you've grown to know and love as a domain admin in the past. The topics in this section are actually going to be focused on the software specifications and kind of like some of the features that are associated with the Synology Directory Server. We're also going to touch on accounts and privileges, and with that, roaming profiles and that kind of thing. And part of this conversation is all about the security and access control of things, because we do have Kerberos-based authentication as well. So you can really enforce password rules and where people are accessing and when people are accessing their profile as well. In terms of the software specifications, we do support Windows RSAT, and you're going to see us utilize that in the next demo here in a few moments. We also support TLS domain controller certification as well, and we can do custom NetBIOS domain names as well, as you saw a little bit earlier. We also have support for single domain controllers in this software package itself. In regards to accounts and privileges, you can, of course, set up group membership and policies that are associated with that. And you're going to see that we're going to do multiple group policies enforcement. Using RSAT, we're going to do one for folder redirection for roaming profiles, and another one for deploying an active backup MSI file based on a group policy object. So you also can do account single sign-on across the apps as well. So let us know in kind of the comments or in an email or something like that at the end of this webinar if you would like to see that, along with maybe an Azure integration as well. As mentioned, we do have home folder support, and this is really in the same vein as folder redirection and also roaming profiles as well. With security and access control, as mentioned, it is a Kerberos-based authentication. And as you saw, I was able to put in my email to the user itself. So if I needed to reset my password, I could do so via email itself. So that's a kind of a handy little trick for those people that may be a little bit forgetful. So you have the ability to enforce a password strength policy as well, similar to how you would set it up in just a regular DSM instance. We also get account lockout policies, and what this really means is not just IP auto blocking or anything like that from the security webinar we did, but also the fact that you can lock out when these profiles can be accessed, and also what IP or IP ranges they can access their profile from. So that way you can really control when people can hit your domain and log on, and make sure it's only in allowed times, like during working hours or something like that. Before we go into the demo, I wanted to touch base on some use cases and just really show you guys how it's a cost-effective domain control for small businesses. As you know, we can integrate with existing infrastructure. either on-prem or in Azure. And again, if you wanted to see that Azure integration or anything like that, we can definitely do that in a different webinar, because honestly, it can be a standalone module in this suite of partner trainings. But the big way we see Synology Directory Server utilized is as a standalone Synology domain controller, because it can help to eliminate Windows domain controller costs. As we know, Windows Server does cost money. And so that licensing associated with it on top of the hardware costs can be a little bit unattainable for some small businesses. That's where Synology's Directory Server comes in, so that you can replace those costs and focus on growing your business and rest assured that your domain is going to be stable. The other way that Synology Directory Server can be utilized is sort of in an office-in-a-box service. So utilizing Synology Directory Server, you can have a cheap, cost-effective, but very stable domain controller, and also utilize our entire collaboration suite, be it Drive, Mail Plus, Office. All of those things can be used in conjunction in a small business. And oh yeah, it can also be an accessible anywhere file server and kind of a next generation setup. So this is a good opportunity for businesses to buy one appliance and accomplish multiple goals for their business as well. The next demo is going to be focusing on roaming profiles and also setting up an active backup group policy object that can be enforced to install an MSI file that we have edited using Windows SDK Orca package. So without further ado, what we're going to do first is show you, I'm in my Kodi profile here. And we're going to go ahead and actually open up Google once more and go back to the NAS, because right now we're going to be setting up some permissions on a specific shared folder so that we can store the roaming profile itself. So we're going to go to Control Panel, Shared Folder, and I've already created a shared folder called Roam. And so what we're going to do is edit those permissions for this portion here. Now, for me, I like to do my permissions via the group level, so I'm not doing a bunch of individual tasks. So we're going to focus on the domain group itself. So we're going to go down to domain users and actually do a custom permissions here. And just click this box and you'll launch the permission editor. Here, you're going to want to take off some of these checkboxes, and we do have a guide we're going to link in our description for the recording about which ones you want to actually tick off or tick on, depending if you, based on different use cases and scenarios for domain users or admins and the like. So what we're going to do here now is just kind of say OK here, and we have added a custom permission here for that roaming profile. And that's just about all you need to do on the DSM side of things at this point in time, because you've already set up your permissions for that roaming profile. Next, I just wanted to really hit home with one thing here is just, you saw that it took maybe one extra click for the domain admins, but just a normal user even, it's just 3 clicks or so. And by default, it's a domain user as well. So you don't even have to click that checkbox in that menu either. It's already by default a domain user. So if we go back through this one more time, you're going to see that it's already part of the domain user group, and you're pretty much done creating this user at this time. Very, very convenient, honestly, and it saves a lot of time for admins in general. Let it save here. Now, at this point in time, we're going to head down. Just one second here. We're going to head back down to the bar here, and we're going to open up group policy management and start to set up those folder redirections themselves. As you can see, I already have RSAT and that kind of thing all set up, and it's already pulling my domain. You'll want to go to settings here on your default domain profile, right click and go to edit. And you can right click pretty much anywhere there's blank space. Go to user config, policies, Windows settings, and folder redirection in that parent folder. So you can click this desktop, properties, and now go to a basic setup, and you can create a folder for each user under the root path. So it's going to create a folder for each user that logs on in that roaming or that roam shared folder itself. So what we're going to do is type in our orangutan device name and also the word roam. And as you can see, it's going to append a name and that folder as well. Hit OK after apply. And we're going to also do this for documents as well. Properties, just like before, basic. and leave that creative folder just the way it was, and literally type in the same exact information. So whenever you hit apply here, you're going to go continue here again, and okay. So that's setting up those roaming profile folder redirections right there. And of course, now what we're going to want to do for good measure is go ahead and do a GP update and go ahead and log back out and back on, because this GP that we just did is enforced whenever you actually log on. So we're going to hit yes and go ahead and log out and log back on as well. But as you can see, it's already telling you it grabbed, it knows that there's a group policy that requires you to log back on. So we're going to go back in here and take a look at our desktop and documents folders as well. And as you can see, it now has a little green icon next to both of those quick access menus, and that's their state saying that that sync is online. What we're going to do here is go to new and create a folder in documents and just see that the folder is created and it does drop into the correct folder in the roaming folder on the NAS itself. So we're going to go to network here and go and hit orangutan with a couple backslash orangutan. Here we go. And we're going to go to Roam. And as you can see, it's already created my profile, and it has desktop and documents. And in documents, it has that folder I created. So we can verify that this roaming profile is correct, and it is redirecting the folders to the correct location as well. What we're going to do here is do a group policy update using Orca to edit the active backup MSI file. So we can basically simulate a large deployment here. Now, I've already created one of these and have it loaded to my software shared folder, but let's do one as if you were going to create it for just from scratch. On mine, I actually didn't pass through all the arguments, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So going down to property in the Orca editor, this is where you can actually change different attributes to have it know your IP address of your NAS or your password or your credentials right from the get-go. So under address here, in between the quotations, type in the NAS of the IP of your NAS rather. Now we're going to go ahead and type in a password for the user account. Just a moment here. And we're also going to add our username under the username attribute up here. And I'm just going to do a local username to the NAS itself. And as you can see, this is pretty much all you're going to need to get this MSI installed and to recognize the credentials, just your username, your IP address, and your password. These proxy addresses and that kind of thing are only if the NAS itself is sitting behind a proxy. And there's one last attribute you could change is no shortcut. You can switch that to a 1 so it doesn't create a shortcut on the desktop itself. But now we can just hit File, Save, and go ahead and move on to creating a group policy object for the active backup MSI deployment. Here we are launching it once more. And this time we're going to go ahead and go to default domain. Actually, no, we're going to go to group policy objects and go to new. And we're going to just label this correctly so that it makes our management of this a little bit easier in the future, and just leave source starter GPO as none. Go to OK. Now go to group policy objects and right click active backup and hit edit. Now what we're going to want to do is go to software install. And that is under policies here. And we're going to go to software settings and software installation. Go ahead and right click here as well. Go to new and also go to package. Here we're going to grab that MSI that we just edited in the last scene, but I'm going to grab the one that I edited previously. I didn't pass through all the arguments. You don't have to do every one of those changes, but I've already uploaded it to the NAS and it's ready to go. We're going to go ahead and assign this deployment instead of publish it, because we don't want it just published and add programs or features. We want it installed on logon. So now you're going to double click on it, go to deployment, and make sure you hit this install this application at logon. You don't even need to go into an advanced or any one of these other tabs, really. This is all you need to do to get this deployed. So now we're just going to go ahead and hit apply. Okay. And now we need to link this to the domain. So we can go ahead and exit out there and link this to an existing GPO on spot.local, select active backup, and you're going to go ahead and be linked. Just double check that it's linked under group policy objects here. So at this point in time, active backup is ready to be installed at logon for your domain users. So I just wanted to show you it's not installed in this instance right now. If we look active backup, you would usually see active backup agent here, but it's not installed. So we're going to have to instead do our GP update. We're going to force it. And it's recognizing that there's policies that need to be enforced on logon, and we're going to go ahead and do that once more. As you can see, the Synology Active Backup for Business Agent is now there. And once it loads down here, you're going to be able to see that it has those arguments that I passed in. But this one, I didn't do my password, but you could add that password or just do IP address and have your users log in with their own credentials upon logon. So it kind of keeps everything a little bit more organized whenever you're actually doing the launch, or you can have it do it all with your domain admin credentials if you want it done that way as well. So what I wanted to say was thank you for everybody for stopping by today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to sacsales@synology.com. For business users, if there are any watching, feel free to reach out to us with product questions, any questions about system design, specifications, or if you need to get in touch with one of our awesome reseller partners, we can speak very highly of them, and they'd be happy to help you out. And likewise, as for resellers, feel free to reach out if you want to register as a partner, because you get great pre-sales support and product training similar to this webinar itself. Feel free to join us for our next webinar. It is Thursday, December 19th, and it is moved up just like this one was in recognition of the holiday season, and it will be our last webinar of this season. And we're going to focus on advanced surveillance and just really how to set it up with a multiple recording servers, CMS, recording server failover, as well as we're going to touch on our new DBA 3219 as well. And once more, thank you for stopping by and taking the time out of your day to learn with Synology. We'll talk soon.